The rain wasn't just falling that night. It was weeping, smearing the lights of my mother-in-law's Bel Air estate into toxic, shimmering bruises against the blackened windows. Inside, under the crystal chandelier that cost more than my childhood home, the air was sterile and sharp with chilled perfume and quieter, colder things. I stood there, 35, holding the secret tight against my ribs like a hairline fracture about to snap, the positive pregnancy test hidden in my silk clutch. I dreamed of this moment, of telling them, of seeing my husband's face soften with a joy we'd stopped daring to mention. But before I could speak, Eleanor Van Horn laid her martini glass down on the marble console with a click that echoed like a gunshot in a cathedral. "The blood tests came back," she said, her voice not raised, but sculpted from dry ice. "The genetic counselor called. With your familial history of Huntington's, it's an unacceptable risk for this family." My husband, Liam, my sweet, weak Liam, stared at his shoes, the imported Italian leather suddenly fascinating. "The procedure is scheduled for Thursday," Eleanor continued, as if discussing the pruning of hedges. "We'll have Margot drive you, and afterward Liam will need some space. You'll stay at the Soho house for a few weeks while we manage the transition." I looked at Liam, my eyes screaming, begging for a flicker of the man who'd whispered promises into my skin. He finally met my gaze, and in those beloved blue eyes I saw only a vacancy, a quiet capitulation. "It's for the best, Clara," he mumbled. "Mother knows about these things." The fracture in my ribs split wide open. It wasn't a request, it was an eviction from my own life, a surgical removal of my future. The hired car waited in the drive, a sleek black tomb on wheels. As the driver, avoiding my shattered reflection in the rearview, pulled away from the only home I'd known for a decade, I pressed my forehead to the cold glass. I had nothing, no child, no husband, no home. Just the hollow, howling truth that I had been nothing more than a temporary, faulty vessel to them. And that was the moment I knew, the real revenge begins now. The Soho House room was a beautiful cage, all muted grays and artfully distressed wood, a sanctuary for the creatively bankrupt and the personally ruined. For 3 days, I didn't move from the bed, the phantom ghost of a child who would never be curling and uncurling in my gut. The silence was a physical presence, thick and suffocating, broken only by the digital chime of a single bank alert. I'd glanced at it, numb, assuming it was the final monthly allowance, the last polite severance pay. The number registered as a meaningless blur. It was only on the 4th day, driven by a base need to know the exact price of my annihilation, that I opened the banking app fully. The balance took a full minute to comprehend. $95 million, a direct wire transfer from the Van Horn Family Trust. No note, no explanation, just a number with 8 zeros, a hush money payment of astronomical proportions. It wasn't generosity, it was the cost of my silence, the value they placed on my discreet disappearance. They had bought my grief, my future, my compliance. They expected me to vanish into a life of quiet, sun-drenched luxury, a well-paid ghost. A fire, slow and smoldering, began to burn through the numbness in my chest. They didn't know me at all. I became a student of my own destruction. I rented a stark, modern apartment in Lower Manhattan with a view of the water, a blank canvas. I hired a forensic accountant, a discreet woman named Anya with eyes like chips of flint. "Follow the money," I told her, my voice strange and steady in my own ears. "Not just this payment, everything. The Van Horn holdings, the trust, Liam's investments, Eleanor's philanthropic foundations." What Anya uncovered was a fascinating, elegant rot. The family fortune, built on old manufacturing, was a precarious facade, leveraged and re-leveraged, a palace built on credit. Liam's venture capital was a series of spectacular, quiet failures propped up by trust funds. Eleanor's charity was a labyrinthine network of shell companies and tax write-offs. The $95 million, it turned out, was a bleeding wound for them. Liquidating it had required selling a flagship property, a painful, unspoken loss. They were bleeding, and they'd paid me to be a silent tourniquet. My transformation was my first weapon. I spent a fraction of the blood money on myself, not in frivolity, but on armor. The soft, curated California wife was stripped away. I became sharp lines and quiet luxury, tailored black coats, boots that clicked with definitive purpose on pavement, my hair a severe, dark sweep. I let a nutritionist hollow my cheeks slightly, let the grief and rage etch themselves into a sharper, more formidable beauty. My eyes, once warm and inviting, now held a distant, observational chill. I looked like a woman who belonged in the glass and steel canyons of Wall Street, in the private rooms of power, and that was precisely the point. I began to attend gallery openings, lectures, charitable galas, the periphery of their world. I was a ghost, but one made flesh, polished and unignorable. I saw Liam once, at a distance at the Met. He was with a new, younger woman, her laugh too loud, her hand perpetually on his arm as if claiming territory. He saw me. He froze, his face draining of color. I offered him a small, cold smile, a mere tilting of the corners of my mouth, and turned away. The shock in his eyes was my first true nourishment. The key, I knew, was not Liam, nor even Eleanor in her gilded fortress. It was his sister, Vivian. Vivian was the true engine of the family, the cool intellect behind the social veneer. She ran the family's legacy office, a sleek high-rise on Park Avenue, managing their remaining assets with a surgeon's precision. She was Eleanor's masterpiece, emotionally detached, ruthlessly pragmatic, terrifying in her absolute lack of warmth. She was the architect. I needed to get close to her. Using a newly created shell corporation, I began to make small, strategic investments in areas I knew Vivian was exploring: green tech, bioinformatics. My corporate entity, Janus Holdings, was a quiet, mysterious player. It caught her attention. An invitation arrived, not to a social event, but to a business dinner, a networking opportunity. It was a foot in the door of her professional sanctum. The dinner was at a members-only club in Midtown, all dark wood and deep leather. Vivian was a sculpture in a cream-colored suit, her blonde hair a perfect helmet, her handshake dry and firm. "Clara," she said, her voice devoid of hostility I'd expected, only a polite, professional curiosity. "Janus Holdings, your investments are intriguingly timed." Over seared scallops and a punishingly expensive burgundy, we talked market trends, regulatory landscapes, liquidity. It was a duel of intellects. I saw her reassess me, the sharp woman across from her a stark contrast to the soft, pleading creature she'd last seen sobbing in her mother's foyer. I let slip, carefully, a piece of inside knowledge about an upcoming FDA ruling, information my team had unearthed. Her eyes flickered. I was no longer just a paid-off problem. I was a potential asset, or a potential threat. She needed to categorize me. "We should continue this discussion," she said smoothly as coffee was served. "My office, Thursday, 10 a.m. I nodded, sipping my water. "I'll be there." Her office was a monument to controlled power, with a view that dwarfed the city. Our meetings became a monthly ritual. We were two chess masters circling. She probed, trying to uncover the source of my capital, my acumen. I fed her just enough truth, a fictional narrative of an inheritance from a reclusive aunt, a sudden, life-changing windfall I was determined to use wisely. I appealed to her pragmatism. I became useful, offering insights, making connections that benefited her. A twisted professional intimacy grew. She began to speak more freely, her disdain for Liam's weakness, her frustration with her mother's old-world sentimentalities about their name. I was a safe receptacle for her contempt, because in her mind, I was already bought and paid for. I was harmless. I was, in her eyes, a creation of the Van Horn fortune. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening in early fall. We were working late in her office, the city a grid of neon and shadow below us, finalizing a complex deal structure. She was exhausted, the mask slipping. She poured 2 fingers of single malt, not offering me any. "Sometimes," she said, staring into her glass, her voice uncharacteristically quiet, "I think my mother's greatest sin was sentimentality. She clung to the wrong things, the name, the appearance. She thought buying your silence was cleaner than a scandal. I disagreed. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I kept my face a placid pool. "Oh?" I asked, my tone neutral. She took a long sip. 95 million. For what? A potential liability, a messy, emotional girl. I argued for a harder line, a stricter NDA, continuous oversight. But mother, she was haunted by the optics.